right. How's it going, my magnificent sons of bitches? And we have another bowl season coming around, and I figured since last year, it's pretty spot on for most of the bowls after the conference championships. During the conference championships, I was dead on. But I figured I would go ahead and do another one of these videos about commie ball, whatever the hell, the sarcastic ball that has been reduced into the NCAA college football bowl games or whatnot. Really, they've kind of been synthetic for probably the past decade. It's all been SEC laden. And, whenever you look at the NCAA, they tend to go ahead and facilitate the Florida market since Disney runs your college football sports now. It's usually the SEC and the ACC. They get carte blanche over everything. And so, let's go ahead and take a look at these games and try to predict exactly who is going to win these games. My odds on favorites, I guess, just to have a little bit of fun here. So you have the Bahama Bowl, which is Miami of Ohio versus the University of Alabama, Birmingham. Um, Miami of Ohio is kind of like a jobber type team, anyways. They're always in the bowl games, but they're, kind of mediocre at best. They're kind of like the Disco Inferno of college football. So, when in doubt, go to the market that's closest to the SEC, closer to the ACC market, closer to that Florida and Disney market. So, I'm going to go ahead and go with the University of Alabama, Birmingham, beating Miami of Ohio. This is a neither here nor there game. Not really it's kind of a lackluster bowl. But I'll go ahead and go with University of Alabama, Birmingham to beat Ohio. So you have the Cure Bowl, number 24 Troy versus University of Texas San Antonio. Both these teams are pretty solid as far as their respective conferences. Troy usually has a pretty solid defense. So I'll go ahead and go with Troy beating University of Texas San Antonio in Florida. Like I said, when in doubt, go with the defense. And definitely the defense is, it sides for, Troy there. So then we have the Fenway Bowl, Cincinnati versus Louisville. These are two similar teams. In fact, they're probably twin teams. I mean, even the colors are just alike. And, these teams are kind of like usually underwhelming in bowls. So this is kind of like a, mid-card versus mid-card champion. I'll go ahead and go with Louisville to go ahead and take this victory in Boston from Cincinnati. I'll go ahead and go with, you know what? No, never mind. Go ahead and give me Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati needs the win a little bit more. They're fixing to go into the Big 12 as soon as Texas and Oklahoma makes their little exodus out of the Big 12. So go ahead and give me Cincinnati to go ahead and help that resume, pad that resume as being a contender. So then we have the Celebration Bowl, Jackson State versus NC Central. I'll go ahead and go with the Deion Sanders team. I'll go ahead and go with Jackson State to beat NC Central in Atlanta. So you got the New Mexico Bowl, SMU versus BYU. I'll go ahead. This is in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'll go ahead and go with Brigham Young in this one right here. Brigham Young, another one of those teams going into the Big 12, needs to have a pretty good resume. SMU is a solid team. It would be a solid win for BYU. It's not the sexiest win, but it's a solid win. So you have the LA Bowl, or maybe it's the Louisiana Bowl. Hell, I don't know. Yeah, it's in Inglewood, California, so it's the LA Bowl. You have Washington State versus Fresno. Go ahead and give me Washington State to beat Fresno. It should be a pretty solid game. It should be a really good game, probably one of the better games of the bowl season. But I just think that Washington State will come up, and they're in that pack. They're in the Pac-12. The Pac-12 is another one of those conferences that's losing two of its major teams. So yeah, the remaining Pac-12 teams are going to have a solid bowl season if they want to go ahead get into another conference. Washington State's one of those ones that needs to have a good resume. Go ahead and give me Washington State over Fresno State. So yeah, the Lending Tree Bowl, Rice versus Southern Mississippi. Rice is relatively new to getting into bowls. Southern Mississippi is not. Southern Mississippi, this is in Mobile, Alabama. Go ahead and give me Southern Mississippi to go ahead and beat um, Rice in the Lending Tree Bowl. You have Las Vegas. You have the Las Vegas Bowl. Number 14, Oregon State versus Florida. I'm going to go ahead. This is in Las Vegas. I'm going to go ahead and go with Oregon State. Florida is one of those teams where they're in a rebuilding mode. They don't have any. I mean, I don't see anything on the horizon coming up for Florida. Oregon State is a part of that Pac 12 conference that needs to. It's going to mean more for Oregon State to get a win over an SEC team than it would be for Florida to beat Oregon. I think that there'll be more on the line for Oregon State. So go and give me Oregon State for a pretty legitimate bowl win over a pretty legitimate opponent. So then you have the Frisco Bowl, Boise State versus North Texas. Boise State is a pretty legitimate opponent. They're a very one of those stingy opponents that I'll talk about more in this video. But they have to go to Frisco, Texas. Go ahead and give me North Texas for an impressive win against Boise State. Then you have the Myrtle Beach Bowl. You have Marshall versus UConn in the Brooks Stadium in Conway in South Carolina. Go ahead and give me Marshall to go ahead and beat UConn. Both of these teams are, pretty. They get into these bowl games, these lesser bowl games year after year. They're not that top 25 talent, but they're pretty consistent. I think that this will probably be a pretty decent game. But go and give me Marshall to beat UConn. You have the famous Idaho Potato Bowl, Eastern Michigan versus San Jose State, and Albert Stadium in Boise, Idaho. Go and give me Eastern Michigan to beat San Jose State in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl. Eastern Michigan is usually, they're one of those teams that, produce a lot of high quality players that actually come out of Eastern Michigan. And San Jose State, they're usually there, but kind of like one of those mid-card teams. So then you have the Boca Raton Bowl, Liberty versus Toledo. Go ahead and give me Liberty. This is one of those games where the teams are pretty close. I'll go ahead and go with Liberty to win the Boca Raton Bowl in Florida. So then you have the New Orleans Bowl, South Alabama versus Western Kentucky. Go ahead and give me Western Kentucky. They're a stingy team. They're, we see some quality players coming out of Western Kentucky. They're a hard team to beat. And they play very, very well in these bowl games. So go and give me Western Kentucky to beat South Alabama in that New Orleans Bowl. So now you have the Armed Forces Bowl, Baylor versus Air Force in Amon G. Carter Stadium in Fort Worth, Texas. Go ahead and give me Baylor for the win. It's pretty much a home game for them. It should be a pretty good game, but I'll go ahead and go with Baylor over Air Force. So now you have the Gasparilla Bowl, Wake Forest versus Missouri. This is the bowl that Missouri opted for because they didn't want to play Kansas. Go ahead and give me Wake Forest to go ahead and, beat Missouri. I think that Missouri, I thought it was kind of cheap for them saying that they didn't want to play Kansas in a bowl. And I thought that, it's kind of tacky. This is exactly what it is. They can sit there and say they can't take the Longhorns can't take the horns down and whatnot, but they'll sit there and hide from um, Kansas. So since that was kind of like a ticky tacky call of saying, you know what, we don't want to play Kansas in a bowl, I'm going to go ahead and say that Wake Forest is, because that means that you. And the sad thing is, that means that your coach doesn't have any confidence in you. To go ahead and say we're going to pull out of a Kansas, that shows you that, it's almost like they're protecting the team. I thought it was kind of tacky, like I said. I'm going to go ahead and go with Wake Forest. Missouri probably will win, but I'm going to go ahead and go with Wake Forest because I thought that was thought it was tacky. Yeah, the Independence Bowl, Houston versus Louisiana. Go ahead. I'll go ahead and go. This is in Shreveport, Louisiana. I'm going to go ahead and go with Houston, though, to go ahead and upset Louisiana. Houston will be one of those teams that'll be joining the Big 12. Houston needs to have a decent resume. I think that they go ahead and they put up a solid performance against a Louisiana team in their backyard in the Independence Stadium in Shreveport, Louisiana. So then you had the Hawaii Bowl, Middle Tennessee State versus San Diego State. Go ahead and give me San Diego State and Marshall Faulk's alma mater to beat Tennessee in Hawaii there. You have the Quick Lane Bowl, Bowling Green versus New Mexico State. This is in Detroit. Go ahead and give me Bowling Green to go ahead and beat New Mexico State. This is another one of those jobber bowls and whatnot. You have the First Responders Bowl, which is Memphis versus Utah State. This is in Dallas. Go ahead and give me Memphis to beat Utah State. Utah State's a solid team. But I'm going to go ahead and go with Memphis on this one. You have the Birmingham Bowl, Coastal Carolina versus East Carolina. East Carolina is a stingy team to me. They actually have a lot of good talent come out of East Carolina. I'm going to go ahead and go with East Carolina to upset Coastal Carolina there. So you have the Camilla Bowl, which is Buffalo versus Georgia Southern. I'm going to go ahead and go with, Georgia Southern in this one. It's in Montgomery, Alabama. Both teams are pretty solid, but I'm just going to go ahead and go with Georgia Southern. It'll be closer to their home. They'll be able to travel a little bit better. So you have the Guaranteed Rate Bowl, Oklahoma State versus Wisconsin. This is in Arizona. I'm going to have to go ahead and go with the Big 12 team, Oklahoma State in this one. Oklahoma State is actually kind of a stingy team. They do show up. They do play well in these bowl games. Wisconsin plays very, very hard. They play very, very well in these bowl games. This is going to be a really, really good game. Probably one of the best bowl games of the season. These teams match up very well. But I'm just going to go ahead and go with Oklahoma State. Like I said, I think that as far as like you're looking at a team that's on the same level, these teams are on the same level in their respective conferences. I think the Big 12 needs to have more success in the bowl season. I think that they understand that they need to have better performances in the bowl season. So this is one of those head-to-head matchups where there's not going to be a lot of ref ball. This is going to be decided on the field. So go ahead and give me Oklahoma State to beat Wisconsin in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. You have the Military Bowl, which is Duke versus University of Central Florida, Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium in Annapolis, Maryland. Annapolis. Go ahead and give me Duke to beat the University of Central Florida. You have the Liberty Bowl, Arkansas versus Kansas. I'm going to go ahead and take Kansas in this one. It's kind of a shame. I think that this was supposed to be Missouri. From what I am to understand, Missouri pulled out. Arkansas, that, says a lot. Arkansas is going to get in. I think that Kansas, in response, I think Kansas puts up a pretty good performance, a pretty solid performance. It's another one of these Big 12 schools that needs to have, the resume, the prestige needs to go up, particularly in a football conference and whatnot. They, need to build that resume. It's important for the Big 12 to perform well in these bowl games. So we had the Holiday Bowl, which is number 15 Oregon versus North Carolina. Go ahead and give me number 15 Oregon. There yet again, there it's the Pac-12. They need to have, with their two major teams going on to the Big Ten, they need to set up their resume to, pad their resume a little bit. I think that this game will mean more to the Pac-12 Oregon Ducks than it will be for the Tar Heels of North Carolina and the ACC. I'm going to go ahead and go with number 15, Oregon winning in San Diego, winning the Holiday Bowl. So then you have the Texas Bowl, Texas Tech versus Ole Miss. Uh, I think that Ole Miss you're going to see a lot of ref ball in this one. The SEC, this is a team that the SEC probably has big plans for in the future. Ole Miss, it appears that way. They've been a real stubborn team for some of the more, they've had pretty good records. I'm going to go ahead and go with Ole Miss beating Texas Tech in Houston to help add to their resume. Like I said, I understand Texas Tech is a Big 12 team. Big 12 needs to build up. But, Texas Tech doesn't really perform well in bowl games. And Ole Miss, like I said, is one of those teams that the SEC was probably really close to playing in the SEC title game. They're going to be protected. So go ahead and give me Ole Miss beating Texas Tech in this Texas Bowl. It's not a very important bowl, but it's one of those ones where it probably means a little bit more to those Ole Miss fans than it would to the Texas Tech fans. Yeah, the Pinstripe Bowl, Minnesota versus Syracuse in Yankee Stadium in the Bronx in New York. Go ahead and give me Syracuse beating Minnesota in the Pinstripe Bowl. Then you have the bowl that I wish Texas could have got in and the opponent that Texas could have gotten. Instead, you get a freaking Oklahoma team that has been pretty much stripped of any kind of relevance. Their coaching staff went to USC. Their players went to South Carolina. And so, you've had a pretty much Oklahoma team. I guess this is kind of like their consolation prize. They get to play Florida State in the Cheez-It Bowl. Florida State is another one of those teams, personally to me, that needs to come back to dominance and college football. Florida State is one of those markets that the NCAA, if they're going to sit there and stack the SEC and give all of these titles to your Alabamas and your Georgias and whatnot, Florida is one of those. Florida State, Texas, Notre Dame, Miami, USC. These are teams that need to start. Nebraska, Colorado. These are teams that need to start being mentioned in the title talk. And so Florida State will definitely probably. Florida State is one of those teams that they have to put back in there into, the conversation of being a potential, national champions. So I'm going to go ahead and go with number 13, Florida State, just embarrassing the Oklahoma Sooners. And them using this Cheez-It Bowl. It's in Florida. Oklahoma's going into Florida, playing Florida State in Orlando, so it's pretty much a home game in these bowls and whatnot. So, yeah, Florida State will probably end up really embarrassing Oklahoma in this game. So then you have another home game, Texas versus Washington. Texas is another one of these teams that needs to return to relevance. We can see the interest in college football isn't what it was, 10 years ago before they started doing these SEC-laden freaking Alabama runs and stuff, where majority of the old college football fans have no interest in watching Alabama, Clemson, SEC flavor of the month. And so that's why they bought in the Texas and the Oklahomas into the SEC. They're trying to go ahead and, secure an audience, but that's Disney. What do you expect from Disney? Disney kills Star Wars. They're killing the MCU. They're killing Indiana Jones. They pretty much kill everything. It's like the fucking Midas touch except with AIDS. So, I'm going to go ahead and go with Texas beating Washington, probably in a probably one of the better bowl games. This will probably end up being one of the better bowl games of the, college. Usually the Alamo Bowl is pretty competitive. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and go with number 20 Texas. I think when yours comes out, I think he kind of makes an impression, sets him up for next year. Texas is the sexy pick next year for people to go ahead and get behind. Bijan needs to have a good game. He'll make a case. He'll probably end up getting picked up next year. So this is a resume game for him. And I think that Texas sets a tone for next year coming in. They'll still have a solid team. So, yeah, go ahead and give me Texas at home in San Antonio pretty much against Washington. You know, you have the Orange Bowl, Tennessee versus number 7 Clemson. This is one of those games that's going to be a pretty tough game to call. Tennessee, they probably have the SEC probably has a lot of plans for Tennessee in the coming years. Tennessee and Georgia, LSU and Alabama, Ole Miss. So it's they want to go ahead and stack the SEC in these, and basically it's like them making a monopoly out of the freaking college football is what they're doing. The SEC wants to monopolize college football, and I guarantee you, at some point in time, they want an all SEC playoff before it goes into the 12 game, which is 24 to 25 season or whatnot. So not next year, but I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't make a major push to try and make the last college football, because whenever you're looking at college football, it's rigged. It's openly rigged. The fans understand that it's rigged. It's rigged by the Associated Press. It's rigged by the coaches. And the only way that the fans have any say is whenever they get outraged. So, technically, we understand that they would have probably rather the, Associated Press and the coaches would have rather seen Alabama get that final playoff spot. But, the fans would have raised hell. So it was Ohio State. It's Ohio State, it's Georgia, it's Michigan, and it's TCU. TCU is the odd man out. That's the one that none of them want, because whenever you look at the Pac-12 or whenever you look at the Big 12, they're a capitalist. The teams that put in the most work, reap the most benefits for their labors, as opposed to the SEC, where Vanderbilt will get the same cut of the money as Georgia does. So it's the Communist Conference. It's the Southeastern Communist Conference is what the SEC stands for. So, they definitely don't want a team like TCU in. However, this is why they always constantly stack, because that's, you look at socialism, you look at communism, and it needs government control for it to function. So this is why the Associated Press, they're not going to do anything, because you would do the Super 8 conferences, 16 teams in each conference, and then have the teams play it out if you wanted a legitimate champion. However, the Associated Press and the coaches can't give up their anthropic conjecture to go ahead and decide who's going to play in these playoffs and whatnot. So, to appease the masses, they'll put in a TCU against, but that they don't want TCU in. Michigan, Ohio State, and Georgia, it's the Big Ten and it's the SEC, so they don't mind those conferences, but they damn sure don't want anybody in from the Big 12 that could go ahead and disrupt their little SEC empire. So then we go into the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Number 23, NC State versus Maryland. Maryland's a very stingy team, but I'm going to go ahead and go with North Carolina. In North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina, number 23, NC State beating Maryland. Maryland's a hard team, but, like I said, when in doubt, go with the home team, and that's exactly what I'm doing. So then you had the Sun Bowl. Number 18, UCLA versus Pitt. This is one of the few games that's in a common site and whatnot, so it should be pretty competitive, but I'm going to go ahead and go with number 18, UCLA versus Pitt. And this one, and and UCLA going in with a pretty impressive win into the Big Ten. You have the Gator Bowl, number 19, South Carolina versus number 21, Notre Dame. This one is in Florida. I'm going to go ahead and go with number 21, Notre Dame in this one. Uh, South Carolina's look strong, but they very rarely show up for their bowl games. Uh, Notre Dame is kind of the same way. They usually are not impressive in bowl games, but I'm just going to go ahead and go with Notre Dame to go ahead and win this one. I think that they just have the most talent right now. They have a little bit more talent than South Carolina. So then you have the Arizona Bowl, which is Ohio versus Wyoming. This is in Tucson, Arizona. Go ahead and give me Wyoming in the Arizona Bowl. You had the Fiesta Bowl. Number 2, Michigan against number 3, TCU. Michigan is one of those markets that they need to really do well in college football. TCU, this probably means more. They need to really build a Pac-12 since they've went ahead and gutted pretty much the Big 12 for years. They need really TCU to come out and perform solid, but they don't really like the Big 12 conference because, like I said, the way that the Big 12 is set up, if TCU wins their bowl games and they get into a bigger bowl, they get a bigger cut, as opposed to like this year, West Virginia, who isn't even going to make a bowl, getting the equal cut as TCU does. West Virginia gets, a standard cut, and TCU gets more money going in to TCU to help their product, because, football, and that's just the way that it works. They would rather have the conference be set up with a degree of communism, socialism, whatever the fuck you want to call it. So they don't really want TCU to succeed in this one. TCU has a lot of talent. Max Duggan is kind of in the mold of a Tim Tebow, Sam Ehlinger, a very solid quarterback. Not as flashy as some, but he can move the chains for you. They have probably one of the best running games, if comparable to Michigan. Their running game is as solid as any team in the nation. They have really good wide receivers, probably way better wide receivers, close to Ohio State. And, if their defense can do exactly what they did against Texas and what they did even against, the second half against Kansas State and be competitive and hold it, then TCU could probably win the whole thing. However, they don't want TCU in. I think that Michigan ends up winning this game with an abundance amount of ref ball. And I'm not saying that Michigan is a bad team. They have a strong running game. They have a strong defense. They are built to win championships as well. But I do think that it's going to be a strong amount of ref ball here. TCU got screwed in 2011 out of a split of the championship. They get screwed in 2014 out of being in the playoffs. And now, you're probably going to see a large amount of ref ball to go ahead and make sure that no Big 12 team competes. TCU usually plays really well in these bowl games. They're kind of those teams where it's us against the world, and that's kind of what you want. Plus, they're a 4-quarter team, a very kind of fun team to watch. But I just don't think that they're wanted here by the committee, by those in charge. And so, I'm going to go ahead and say that Michigan ends up beating TCU with a fair amount of ref ball and goes on to California to play for the national championship. So then you got the Peach Bowl. And Georgia basically plays Ohio State in a home game. Now, by every other metric, Ohio State should just blow the fucking lid off of this game. Georgia graduated a lot of its defense, so its defense isn't incredibly great as last year's defense was. They, like I said, a lot of them left for the NFL. Ohio State is bringing in C.J. Stroud. He's got a quick release. The kid can fit the ball into tight windows. Their passing game is probably the most lethal right now in the playoffs. Probably got the best quarterback in the country right now. One of them, anyways. And so, with Marvin Harrison Jr. in the Ohio State receiving corps, there's no reason why they wouldn't just absolutely dominate Georgia. However, with that being said, this is a home game for Georgia. It's an SEC country. And I do think that Georgia will end up beating Ohio State. Like I said, it is a home game for them. I think Georgia will dominate Ohio State. There's just no way that they're losing in their own backyard. So go ahead and give me Georgia beating Ohio State pretty much at home. So then you have the Music City Bowl, Iowa versus Kentucky, in Nashville, Tennessee. Go ahead and give me Kentucky. No, go ahead and give me Iowa. Iowa is a hard team to beat. Even it doesn't matter. You don't blow out Iowa. So you got a Big Ten team versus an SEC team. I'm gonna go ahead and go with Iowa to beat Kentucky in the Music City Bowl. So then you have the the ultimately what the Alabama fans are gonna sit there and tell you is the real national championship, the Sugar Bowl. And why? Because fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. That's what Alabama fans are gonna tell you. Because they are so bitter about not being in the playoffs that they feel like they were screwed. So you got number 5 versus number 9 Kansas State, which are the Big 12 champions, which beat TCU. And I think that this is in New Orleans. And now I want to go ahead and make this very clear. Kansas State, regardless of what you think, they're not the sexiest team. They don't get a lot of the national attention. They're not sitting there, getting freaking title shots at your title shots, much like Alabama. However, they are a solid team. They always have a good defense. They always have a good running game year in and year out. No doubt that they have the defense to stop Bryce Young and to stop the Alabama offense. And they have the offense to go ahead and control the clock and whatnot. This is what makes a really solid, playoff worthy caliber team and whatnot. And Kansas State usually does a really good job in these bowls. Go ask LSU, who they blew out 42-20 just 11 months prior. And so, no doubt, can Kansas State beat Alabama? Can they really, could this game get ugly for Kansas State? And could Kansas State really make an example? And they need to, at the end of the day, they really need the Big 12 needs to win more than the SEC does. The SEC has been basically handed the college football market where you have number 5 Alabama, or number 1 Georgia, number 5 Alabama, number 6 Tennessee, and finally I think that LSU was number 11, but they dropped to number 16. And you have all these teams that are usually in the top 10 year in and year out. So they're given these big bowls all the time, and they're given the playoffs every year. So, however, with that being said, this is Alabama's consolation prize. I do think Alabama beats Kansas State in New Orleans. So go and give me Alabama to beat Kansas State. So you have the Rely Quest Bowl, number 22 Mississippi State versus Illinois. Illinois is a hard team. They're a hard team to beat. But they're playing in Florida and they're playing Mississippi State. I'll go ahead and go with Mississippi State to beat Illinois. So you have the Citrus Bowl, number 17 LSU versus Purdue. This is one of those games I think that could be an upset. Purdue is one of those stingy teams. I do think that LSU, they played in the SEC championship game. Purdue played and lost to Michigan, and I think that this is going to be one of those games. I'm going to go ahead and say that this is going to be my first upset. I'll go ahead and take Purdue to beat LSU. I just think that they'll find a way to do it. So now you have the Cotton Bowl Classic, number 10 USC versus number 16 Tulane. I think that USC will go ahead and make an example out of Tulane. I think that they were so close to getting into the playoffs, and I think that they'll make an example out of Tulane. Tulane number 16. It would be embarrassing for USC to lose the Cotton Bowl to Tulane. Caleb Williams needs to go ahead. This needs to be a resume game for him. This may be one of the few chances this year that he could really go ahead and promote his status up. I think it will mean more to USC than it does to Tulane, even though USC is the bigger opponent. I think it just means more to USC not to get embarrassed again. I think that they beat Tulane by a pretty good score. So you have number 8 Utah versus number 11 Penn State. Once again, Utah is that Pac-12 team. I think it will mean more, especially since the Big Ten are scalping some of their teams. They're, USC and UCLA are going to the Big Ten. So go ahead and give me Utah to go ahead and beat Penn State in the Rose Bowl. So now you have the College Football Playoffs National Championship, which would be Georgia versus Michigan, from what I have. And like I said, I think that it's going to be another SEC title. I think it's going to be Georgia. I don't think that the Associated Press and the coaches poll is going to go anywhere. I think that the next year's top 10 will feature 4 SEC teams like it has for the past decade. So you're going to continue with the SEC favoritism while Texas, while Oklahoma in the next couple of years will go to the SEC. So go ahead and give me Georgia repeating as national championships, coming back and thoroughly having a similar type of game against Michigan. And then the SEC fans, the Alabama fans will sit there and say how, oh yeah, we beat Kansas State and we should have made it, and TCU had no business. That's what you're going to hear all year next year. And how they're pretty much like an NFL conference, and how this is not set up. You're going to see a lot of ref ball in these playoff games. There'll be ref ball, against TCU. There's going to be ref ball in this against Michigan. But, to be fair, Michigan, you're going to get a lot of ref ball against TCU. So whenever, you want to complain, ultimately we understand that college football hasn't been the same probably for the past decade, probably for even longer. So anyways, yeah, these are my playoff predictions. And then, Alabama will sit there and say, well, we never played Georgia and we beat the, whatever. You're going to have the Alabama fans talking shit. You're going to have the SEC fans talking shit and how they should pretty much, dominate. And they're going to expand the playoffs so they can go ahead and get in more SEC teams. That's what's going to happen. Instead of doing something pragmatic like the Super 8, the Big 8 conferences, the Power 8 conferences, and let these teams play it out. They're going to go ahead and keep that conjecture for the Associated Press, for the coaches, and stuff like that, where they can control. It's the most rigged, like I said, it's the most rigged sport there is college football. So anyways, you people tell me what you think. Like, sub, do the shit YouTube, Facebook, whatever the hell this is loaded up on. Tell me to do to get over.